Stop! Get on the ground!
What you gonna do when Chevy John don't come for you? Taser! Oh, bad boys, what you gonna do?
They run it.
What you gonna
Right, you
do?
got it.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when you
Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Wednesday and a great week so far. I'm coming on here, I'm having a really good week. I wanted to thank everyone for their support on my channel. The fact that dozens of people are interested in what I have to say, when the main purpose of this was for me to heal for myself, is just really icing on the cake. So I really appreciate all the love and support that I've received. So I'm going to go ahead and continue the next episode in my saga. And in this episode, I will talk about the day that everything kind of fell into place from my previous episode and fell apart at the same time. So if you're interested in this episode, please stay tuned. So in the last episode, I talked about basically how I met my husband, our dating situation and how we navigated it with me being a Jehovah's Witness and him not being one. And basically, if you haven't watched that video, the entire relationship was basically a secret. I basically withheld that information from all of my family, all of my friends, and even all of my coworkers, because I just feared if I told one person about my relationship that it would get back to either my family or the elders in my congregation. So I was really hesitant about telling anyone. And I was really stressed about how everything was going to pan out, because I knew I had to move out sooner or later, because I knew I was getting married soon. And so all of these things, I didn't know how it was going to fall into place. I was in the process of putting my stuff in storage, trying to move things a little at a time. So by the time I got my apartment, I would be ready. But I still did not have an action plan. But basically, one day, everything again kind of fell into place and fell apart all at the same time. So it basically all started with a simple errand that I was helping my fiance run. He had to actually go to the DMV to get his license, but he had a couple of traffic tickets where he moved from. And so in order to get his license in the state of Georgia, by the time, he let those tickets lapse and everything. So by the time he had to get his license in Georgia, he basically had to take the whole road test over again. And so mind you, this is in the summertime. The year is 2013. And so all the teenagers and stuff are trying to get their license at the same time and take the road test. So basically, unless you were there at the DMV at the crack of dawn, you had to set an appointment. And all the appointments were basically booked until several months out. And that wasn't going to be possible since, as I mentioned in my last episode, he had to basically drive up to his parents' house to go purchase a car, and we were planning on getting married. So in order to do all that, he had to be licensed. So basically, I was gonna meet him up there at the crack of dawn, and it's like a 40-50 minute drive to his house. And so I had to get up at like 4 or 5 that morning from my house and drive up to his house. So I remember the evening before, I basically packed a little duffel bag of just a simple change of clothes and stuff, so that once we got done with everything, got done with the DMV, I could basically shower at his place and get ready and get ready for the rest of my day. And I was planning on spending the day with him. So I had everything packed up. I had my alarm clock set for like 4 or 5 in the morning. And at this point, the night before actually was my parents' meeting night. So I remember hearing them come in the door and, come back from the meeting and everything. But at this point, I was so, I guess, ashamed, feeling so guilty about what was going on and what I was hiding from them. My interactions with them was very limited. It was just the basics, the basic interactions. And so I just I remember that night, I was basically pretending to turn in for the night, so I wouldn't, kind of have to face them. So I didn't realize that evening would be the last time that I would hear my parents or see my parents. So my alarm clock is set. I go to bed. And, I knew I had to be up early, so I kind of went to bed relatively early. And so I got up around 4:30 in the morning, had my clothes ready, grabbed my duffel bag, and went to go head out the door. But one of the things that usually happens, my younger sister, who lived with us at the time as well, her room is next to my room. So there are a lot of evenings where I would kind of be, asleep or in my room, and I'd hear her because she'd be, doing whatever teenage girls do. So I had a creeping feeling that she was going to be awake when I left the house, but I just decided, you know what, just run the risk. Maybe she might be asleep this evening. So walked out the door, got in my car, and as I'm backing out of the driveway, I see my sister's bedroom light turn on. And that's when I realized that I was busted. So I keep going. I'm driving out of the subdivision. As I'm getting ready to turn out of the subdivision into the main road, my mom calls. And so apparently my younger sister had, obviously she saw me leave, and she woke up my parents to tell them that I had gone. And that's one thing about my sister, she's a nice person, but and she's kind of one of those people that were a little more free-spirited than I was. So she was basically doing her own thing, doing normal teenage girl stuff. But one thing she couldn't do was hold water. So she basically woke my parents up and told them that I had snuck out the house. And so then my mom called, and she was like, what's going on? What are you doing? I know you've been hiding something from me. You need to explain to me what's going on. And I remember making a quick excuse, because at the time I was in grad school. I was about to wrap up my master's at the time. And so I did a lot of conferences and a lot of trainings during the summer. So I used the excuse of that to kind of tell her that I was going, I was going out of town basically, on one of these conferences. Came up with some crazy, basically, lie. Of course, she did not believe me. She's like, when you get home, you need to explain everything to me. So I just realized, I knew I was definitely busted. But I continued driving. But I remember just the terror and the fear that I felt of just basically being caught and just not knowing what to do. I remember driving on the interstate crying. I actually thought my stepdad had followed me, because they basically knew that I was leaving not too far after I left the subdivision. So it was a scary moment for me, just basically driving away. And even like my sister was texting me and saying, hey, you need to turn around, you need to come back home. Mom saying you need to come back home right away. And remember me being just so scared and wanting to turn around and go back home, because for the most part, how my parents felt of me, my parents' approval was very important to me at the time. So anytime they didn't approve of something, I was always doing everything in my power to make it right. And let's ignore the fact that I was an almost 28-year-old woman still living with her parents. So I was a grown woman, but I still, again, greatly, feared my parents' wrath and kind of feared their lack of approval. And I knew most definitely they wouldn't approve of what I was doing at this point. But something in me, usually I would be the type, again, to turn around and face the music and talk to my parents. But this time, I actually just shut off my phone. I turned off my phone because they were calling. I was getting basically calls from 3 different numbers. Everyone was basically calling me, basically demanding an answer, trying to figure out where I was going or what I was doing. But I looked at my phone. I called my fiance. I remember crying and just screaming about, oh my goodness, I think they're following me. They're calling me. I'm in trouble. And just panicking so much about what was going on, because it was just so scary, just basically running away and not listening or not going with what they were saying this time. But after I got off the phone with him, I basically took my phone and I shut it off. So luckily nobody was following me. So I continued, basically kept driving, got to my fiance's place. And then when I turned my phone back on, I had all these missed calls and voicemails and just endless text messages from my family, you know, trying to get an explanation, trying to figure out what's going on. I remember one of the last texts I got from my mom was, you know, come back home. Let's fix this. Jehovah can fix this for us. But I remember just, you know, deciding once and for all to just do what I felt was right. So anyway, I got to my fiance's house. We ran our errand. He got his license and everything. Everything turned out smooth. But in the meantime, I just kind of made a snap decision. I ended up sending my mother one more text, and this time it was the truth. I told her about, you know, basically that I was dating a man that was not a Jehovah's Witness. We were getting married in a couple of weeks, and, you know, and I'm really sorry for hiding this from her, but, you know, this is what's happening. And that I told her I'm not coming home tonight because I didn't want to face her. Because my original plan was to actually return home after I spent the day with my fiance and just face the music and tell them everything. But one of the things that I greatly fear growing up was the fear of confrontation. So I was never that person that basically disagreed with my parents or was defiant or everything. I was just terrified at what I'd have to face if I had to deal with something where I was going against what my parents wanted. So I was just terrified. I in hindsight, I don't think they would have been, you know, it wouldn't have been a crazy thing. I know they would have flipped out verbally, but I don't think I was necessarily in any harm. But at that time, I guess I felt I just was in great fear of what was going to happen if I decided to go home and really tell them the truth. So instead, I kind of took the easy way out, and I kind of do feel bad about that. But at the time, I thought it was the best thing for me to do at that time. So yeah, I sent her a text, basically told her I wasn't coming home that night, and, you know, and I am really sorry for disappointing her. And then immediately after that, I actually called the phone company and asked them to change my number, because I knew it was coming after that. I knew once I left home that my parents were going to basically, you know, turn me over to my elders. And at the time, I was in a different congregation from my parents. I was in a foreign language congregation. So I knew they were going to talk. They knew which congregation I was at. They were going to talk to my elders and tell them what happened. So I basically ended it there. So basically left my house. I actually made plans to sneak back when nobody was home and try to get the rest of my stuff, but that actually never happened. So I basically, when I left home, I left with the clothes on my back and maybe an extra pair of clothes, and plus the stuff I put in storage. I put about half the things that I owned in storage. So I basically lost half of my stuff. But the good thing was, one of the things that I did put into storage was important documents like my birth certificate and things like that. So I was actually able to use those things to get married. And so before we made the trip to his parents, where his parents lives, and to get the car and everything, because we technically weren't residents of that state, we actually had to get married in Georgia first. So we got married in the courthouse and everything. And then the week after that, we traveled up to where his parents live, and we did the full, you know, the formal ceremony of getting married. So our technical anniversary is basically the week before we actually got married. But basically, you know, for some reason, I was smart enough to get all my important documentation, like my birth certificate, out of the house, so I could take care of that. But I had no idea at the time that I was going to be leaving home in that manner. So it was basically a really crazy time, because around the same time my husband was finishing aviation school, and he was in like student housing. So he had to he was in an apartment, but he basically had to leave that apartment within a couple weeks after he finished school. And so at the same time, I'm leaving home. So we did get married and everything, but for the next couple of weeks, we were kind of technically without a place to live, but we was able to live in like hotel. We had enough money saved up between the both of us to basically stay like in hotels and things like that until we were able to finally find our apartment. and we both had like basically jobs, prospects, and things like that. So wasn't too bad. I consider myself one of the fortunate ones, because there's a lot of Jehovah's Witness young people who, you know, end up either getting into trouble, or they decide that the religion is not for them, and they basically are forced to leave their parents' house, and they basically don't necessarily have an action plan. They don't have a place to stay. They don't necessarily have any money saved up. So it's really a very trying time when you're in that predicament. So within those next few weeks, you know, we were able to, again, settle down, find a place. You know, again, it felt like freedom being away from my parents once and for all. I always had that fear instilled in me that, you know, once I lived on my own, life was going to be rough, and you don't know how rough it is out there. You know, it's okay for you as a 28-year-old woman to live with your parents and just, you know, help contribute towards the bills. When you get out there, it's going to be rough. But I just remember the freedom I had, you know, even though at this point I was living with my husband, just the freedom of being able to have your own spot. That was a wonderful thing. And so it felt really good being on my own and, you know, being free, even if I lost half my stuff in the process. I do remember my mom sending me some other documentation that I forgot to bring. She mailed it to me through, I had a P.O. box, so she mailed it to me. And we were in limited contact through email, since I had changed my phone number. But I was just at the time in such fear, because I just didn't want to hear my mom's rage. I didn't want to hear her disappointment. I just was afraid of, you know, how that was going to turn out. So, you know, again, sometimes I think of it and I feel guilty, because I feel like I took the coward's way out. But at the time, I felt like it was the best way to go to avoid too much of a confrontation. So I literally overnight, you know, basically disappeared from, you know, as far as my family, the friends, any friends that I had in the organization, the people in the congregation. I literally just left everything behind all in one night. So basically that wraps up the story about the day that I finally escaped, and how everything fell into place and fell apart all on the same day. But mind you, at this point, I am still very strongly indoctrinated. I still strongly believe that Jehovah's Witnesses are the one and only true religion. So that was deeply ingrained in my mind at that time. So in the next episode, I will talk about how I woke up, the circumstances around me waking up, what actions I took once I woke up, and basically the aftermath of what happened after that. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned to the next episode. Also, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Continue checking out the channels in my description box. Again, I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Much love.